Superforecasting, The Art and Science of Prediction by Philip E. Tetlock and Dan Gardner. Picture this. A researcher devotes 20 years of his life to one massive experiment. He rounds up hundreds of experts, professors, media pundits, government advisors, and gets them to make thousands of predictions about world events. Will nations go to war? Will markets collapse? Will governments fall? He waits patiently as the years roll by, carefully tracking every single forecast. Then, when he finally crunches the numbers, he discovers something absolutely stunning, something so unexpected that it becomes almost legendary. The average expert was roughly as accurate as a dart-throwing chimpanzee. That researcher was Philip Tetlock, and honestly, at first he didn't mind the joke. It was funny, sure, and it made a powerful point. Those confident talking heads we see on television, the ones telling us exactly what's coming next, often have zero proven skill whatsoever. Their real talent isn't predicting the future, it's spinning a good yarn with absolute conviction. But as the chimp joke spread, something strange happened. Its meaning started to twist. People began thinking that all expert prediction is worthless, that the future is fundamentally unknowable, and that anyone trying to forecast it is just wasting their time. And that's where our real story kicks off. Because hidden deep within that same research, Tetlock discovered something else. A secret. While most experts performed no better than random guessing, a tiny handful of them showed genuine, measurable, consistent ability to predict what was coming. They weren't mystics or fortune tellers. They didn't have access to classified intel. They were just different. They thought differently. This discovery lit a fire under Tetlock, leading to a second, even more ambitious project, a massive forecasting tournament backed by the United States intelligence community. It brought together thousands of ordinary people from all walks of life to compete in predicting world events. And from that competition emerged a new breed of champions. People like Bill Flack, a retired government employee from Nebraska, or Doug Lorch, a retired programmer from California. Regular folks with no special training who, working from their home laptops, began forecasting the future with, frankly, astonishing accuracy. They beat the experts. They beat university teams from MIT. They even beat professional intelligence analysts with access to classified secrets. Tetlock called them superforecasters. And today, I'm going to share their secrets with you. This isn't just about predicting the future. It's about a completely different way of thinking, open-minded, curious, careful, and self-critical. By the end of our time together, you'll understand what separates the vague guesses of talking heads from the calibrated judgments of superforecasters. And more importantly, you'll see that this skill isn't some magical gift. It's something that can be learned. It's a way of thinking you can start developing in your own life, starting right now. To really grasp how revolutionary superforecasting is, we first need to understand why most of us, including the so-called experts, are absolutely terrible at it. For centuries, prediction has looked a lot like medicine before science arrived on the scene. Think about the history of medicine. For thousands of years, you had charismatic figures like Galen, physician to Roman emperors, who was completely certain of his own genius. He once wrote about a treatment. All who drink of this treatment recover in a short time, except those whom it does not help, who all die. It is obvious, therefore, that it fails only in incurable cases. Let that sink in for a moment. If the patient gets better, my treatment worked. If the patient dies, the case was hopeless. It's a perfect, self-sealing loop that makes it impossible to ever be wrong. And for over 1,000 years, this was medicine, filled with brilliant, confident men who had profound trust in their own judgment. But they lacked one crucial ingredient: doubt. The world of forecasting has been stuck in a similar dark age. We have our own modern Galens, celebrity pundits who speak with absolute certainty, tell compelling stories, and are never held accountable for their track records. We listen to them because our brains crave certainty we're deeply uncomfortable with, maybe. As psychologist Amos Tversky once joked, most people only have 3 settings on their mental probability dial: gonna happen, not gonna happen, and maybe. The problem is, reality doesn't work that way. The future is almost never a simple yes or no. It's almost always a maybe. And the art of forecasting lies in distinguishing between a 60% maybe and a 40% maybe, or a 75% maybe and an 80% maybe. This is the first secret of the superforecaster. They've thrown out that three-setting dial and replaced it with a finely graded continuum of uncertainty. They're probabilistic thinkers. When President Obama was deciding whether to launch the raid on that compound in Pakistan, he listened to his intelligence advisors give him probabilities ranging from 30 to 95% that Osama bin Laden was actually there. According to one account, his response was essentially, "This is 50-50, a coin flip." He collapsed all that nuance back into a simple maybe. A superforecaster would never do that. They understand that those small differences, the gap between 60 and 70%, are where real insight lives. That's the space where good judgment happens. They embrace uncertainty not as confusion, but as a fundamental feature of reality. So how do they navigate this uncertain world? This brings us to the second key difference between superforecasters and everyone else. It involves two creatures from an ancient Greek poem, the hedgehog and the fox. Philosopher Isaiah Berlin once divided the world's great thinkers into two categories, based on a line from the poet Archilochus. The fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing. Hedgehogs are people with a big idea. They see the world through the lens of a single, overarching theory. They might be free market fundamentalists or socialists, environmental doomsters or technological optimists. Whatever their ideology, they apply it to every problem they encounter. They're confident, decisive, and they tell tight, simple stories. The media absolutely loves them. And according to Tetlock's research, they're terrible forecasters. Their big idea acts like tinted glasses that distort everything they see. When new information arrives, it either fits their theory and confirms their beliefs, or it doesn't fit and gets dismissed as noise. As a result, they're often stubbornly, confidently wrong. Here's the kicker. Tetlock found that the more famous an expert was, the less accurate they were. Why? Because the media adores hedgehogs. Foxes, on the other hand, are completely different. They're eclectic. They draw on many different tools and ideas depending on the problem. They gather information from as many sources as possible. They're not committed to a single grand narrative. Their thinking is full of howevers, buts, and, on the other hands. They're comfortable with complexity and nuance. They readily admit when they're wrong and change their minds. And Tetlock found that these foxes had real, modest foresight. They were the ones who beat the chimp. Superforecasters are the ultimate foxes. They have what Tetlock calls a dragonfly eye. A dragonfly's eye isn't a single lens. It's a bulging sphere covered with thousands of tiny lenses, each giving a slightly different perspective. All that information flows into its brain and gets synthesized into a single, crystal-clear image. That's how a superforecaster thinks. They don't just have one view on a problem, they actively hunt for many. This leads us to one of their most powerful mental habits. When faced with a new question, say, how likely is it that the Renzetti family has a pet? Most of us would start with the specific details. Frank Renzetti is a bookkeeper. Mary works at a daycare. They have one 5-year-old son. We'd start building a story. This is what Daniel Kahneman calls the inside view. A superforecaster does the opposite. They start with the outside view. Before looking at any details about the Renzettis, they'd ask a simple question. What percentage of American households own a pet? That number, which turns out to be about 62%, is called the base rate. That becomes their starting point, their initial anchor. Then, and only then, do they turn to the inside view, the details about the family, and use that information to adjust the number up or down. This simple shift in perspective, outside view first, is a powerful antidote to storytelling and bias. It grounds your forecast in statistical reality before you get swept away by the specifics of a particular case. But what if you don't have a base rate? What if the question seems completely unique? That's where another core skill comes in, a technique inspired by physicist Enrico Fermi. Fermi was famous for making surprisingly accurate estimates for seemingly impossible questions, like, how many piano tuners are there in Chicago? Most people would just toss out a wild guess, but Fermi would break the problem into a series of smaller, manageable questions. For example, 1. How many people live in Chicago? 2. On average, how many people are in a household? 3. What percentage of households own a piano? 4. How often does a piano need tuning? 5. How long does it take to tune one piano? 6. How many hours a year does a full-time piano tuner work? Suddenly, an impossible question becomes a series of educated guesses. You might not know any of these numbers exactly, but you can make reasonable estimates for each one. And when you multiply them together, the errors in your guesses tend to cancel each other out, and you end up with an answer that's often remarkably close to the truth. This process, which superforecasters call Fermiizing, is about more than just numbers. It's a way of thinking that forces you to break down complexity, identify your assumptions, and separate what you know from what you don't. It flushes ignorance out into the open. So, the superforecaster starts with an outside view, Fermiizes the problem, synthesizes different perspectives, and lands on an initial, finely grained probability. But their work is far from over. In fact, it's just begun. This brings us to perhaps the most important habit of all, belief updating. A forecast isn't a one-time event. It's a living judgment that must be adjusted as new information arrives. The legendary economist John Maynard Keynes is often quoted as saying, "When the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir?" Superforecasters live by this creed. They're constantly monitoring the news, looking for signals that suggest their forecast might be off. But this isn't a simple, mechanical process. It's a delicate balancing act. The author describes it as navigating between Scylla and Charybdis, the two sea monsters from Greek mythology. On one side, you have the danger of underreaction. This is when you're too attached to your initial belief, and you dismiss new evidence that contradicts it. This is the trap of belief perseverance, where our identities and egos get tangled up in our judgments, making it hard to admit we were wrong. On the other side, you have the danger of overreaction. This is when you see a single piece of new information, a headline, a rumor, and you drastically change your forecast, forgetting all the solid reasoning that went into your initial judgment. So how do superforecasters navigate between these dangers? The tournament data revealed a clear pattern. They update more often, but in smaller increments. Think of it like steering a large ship. You don't wait for it to drift way off course before yanking the wheel hard. You make constant, tiny adjustments to the rudder to keep it on a steady heading. Each new piece of information is like a tiny nudge on that rudder. Does this new fact increase the probability from 65 to 68%, or does it decrease it from 45 to 42%? This process is the essence of what's known as Bayesian updating. You gradually get closer to the truth by constantly adjusting your prior beliefs in proportion to the weight of new evidence. All of these habits, probabilistic thinking, dragonfly-eyed perspective, Fermiizing, and constant updating, require a certain kind of character. And this is the final and perhaps most profound secret of the superforecasters. It's not that they're geniuses. In fact, while they're smarter than average, their intelligence isn't off the charts. The strongest predictor of becoming a superforecaster wasn't intelligence or political knowledge or anything like that. It was something the author calls perpetual beta. In the software world, perpetual beta describes a product that's never considered finished. It's constantly being used, analyzed, and improved. Superforecasters have this mindset about themselves. They believe their abilities are the product of effort. They have what psychologist Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset. Failure isn't a verdict on their abilities. It's a learning opportunity. They're driven by a relentless desire to improve. After every forecast, whether they nail it or miss completely, they conduct unflinching postmortems. Where did my thinking go wrong? What assumptions did I miss? Did I get it right for the wrong reasons? This requires deep intellectual humility, recognizing that reality is staggeringly complex and our ability to understand it is limited. But this isn't crippling self-doubt. It's a powerful motivation to keep learning, keep questioning, and keep getting better. It also requires what psychologist Angela Duckworth calls grit, passionate perseverance for long-term goals. Forecasting is hard, frustrating work, but they stick with it. This commitment to self-improvement is what truly sets them apart. Try, fail, analyze, adjust, try again. It's a simple loop, but it's the engine of all learning and expertise. And when you bring these individuals together, something remarkable happens. They form super teams. Tetlock found that when superforecasters worked in teams, their accuracy improved by another 50%. These weren't just any teams. They were groups that mastered the art of disagreeing without being disagreeable. They practiced what the author calls constructive confrontation. They challenged each other's assumptions, shared information freely, and pushed each other to be better. These superteams became so accurate that they consistently beat prediction markets, which many economists consider the gold standard for aggregating information. It showed that a small group of thoughtful, open-minded people, working together the right way, could be wiser than the crowd. Finally, the book asks a critical question: can a leader be a superforecaster? After all, leaders are expected to be confident, decisive, and visionary. How can you be all those things while also being humble, cautious, and probabilistic? The answer lies in a concept from 19th-century Prussian military thinking called Auftragstaktik, or mission command. The idea is simple. A leader should tell their subordinates what to achieve, but not how to achieve it. This empowers those on the front lines to use their own judgment and adapt to the unpredictable fog of war. A true leader, in this model, does two things. First, during the deliberation phase, they act like a fox. They encourage debate, welcome skepticism, and synthesize many different perspectives. But once a decision is made, they switch modes. During implementation, they act like a hedgehog. They commit wholly, project confidence, and drive the team forward with unwavering determination. They understand, as General Eisenhower once said, that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. This is the leader's balancing act, to be intellectually humble, but behaviorally decisive. So what do we take away from all this? For me, the most powerful message of superforecasting is profoundly hopeful. Foresight is not a mystical gift, it's a skill. It's the product of a particular way of thinking, and it's a way of thinking that anyone can learn. It's easy to feel intimidated by the math and jargon, Bayesian updating, Breyer scores, probabilistic thinking. But at its heart, the wisdom of the superforecasters is simple and timeless. It's about being curious, not dogmatic. It's about being humble, not arrogant. It's about being more interested in understanding reality than in confirming your own biases. It's about seeing your beliefs not as treasures to be guarded, but as hypotheses to be tested. In a world that seems to reward loud, confident voices, this book is a quiet celebration of a different kind of strength. It's the strength of the person willing to say, "I'm not sure," the person willing to change their mind, the person who understands that true wisdom lies not in knowing everything, but in recognizing the vastness of your own ignorance. How can you start applying this in your own life? Let me offer 3 simple practices. First, the next time you have a strong opinion about how something will turn out, an election, a sports game, a work project, try putting a number on it. Don't just say, "I think this will happen." Ask yourself, on a scale of 0 to 100%, how confident am I? The simple act of assigning a number forces you to confront the true level of your uncertainty and moves you from vague opinion to a testable forecast. Second, practice taking the outside view. Before you dive into the specifics of a decision, ask yourself, how often do things of this sort happen in situations of this sort? Whether you're estimating how long it'll take to finish a project or how likely you are to get a job offer, Starting with the base rate will give you a much more realistic anchor for your judgment. And third, become an active open-mindedness practitioner. Don't just be passively open to new ideas, actively seek them out. If you believe strongly in one side of an argument, make it a habit to read the smartest person who holds the opposite view. Try to understand their argument so well that you could explain it to their satisfaction. This is the essence of dragonfly-eyed thinking. That was a summary of Superforecasting, The Art and Science of Prediction, by Philip E. Tetlock and Dan Gardner. We've journeyed through the core ideas today, but I'll be honest with you. A summary can only take you so far. The real magic happens when you read the book yourself. It's in the quiet moments, when a particular story or a simple phrase resonates with you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has sparked your curiosity, I truly encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you think about thinking itself. A link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next journey into another life-changing book on the Billionaire's Bookshelf. Your support helps us continue to bring these powerful ideas to more people. Let's keep growing together.